What does it do to the people who stand before it, knowing it should not be there at all? Because Darvaza is not merely a burning crater, it is a confrontation, a place where the distance between human intention and human consequence collapses into a single glowing wound in the earth. Unlike natural wonders shaped over millions of years, Darvaza has a birthday, a moment of origin measured not in geological epochs, but in paperwork, machinery, and human judgment. That knowledge changes the way people experience it. When standing at the edge of a volcano, one accepts its power as ancient and indifferent. When standing at Darvaza, one knows this fire was invited. The awareness lingers quietly. The flames are not just burning gas, they are burning evidence. Many visitors describe an unexpected emotional shift after the initial shock fades. Fear does not dominate for long. Awe dulls quickly. What replaces them is discomfort, not with the fire, but with the realization that this place exists because someone once believed the problem was temporary. In the modern world, most disasters are framed as events. They begin, peak, and end. Darvaza refuses that structure. It has no clear middle and no visible conclusion. It exists in a permanent present tense, forcing anyone who encounters it to confront the idea that some mistakes do not resolve themselves within a human lifetime. Psychologists who study prolonged exposure to extreme environments often speak of cognitive erosion, the slow wearing away of certainty when the mind is faced with something it cannot categorize neatly. Darvaza produces this effect not through chaos, but through stability. The fire is always there, always burning, always unchanged. The human brain is deeply uncomfortable with that kind of permanence. At night, when the desert cools and sound carries farther, the crater seems louder, though the flames make no true roar. The sound comes from perception, not volume. Every flicker feels amplified. Every movement of air seems intentional. The mind, searching for patterns, invents meaning where none exists. This is where Darvaza becomes something more than an industrial accident. It becomes a psychological mirror. People project their anxieties onto it, fears about environmental collapse, about technological arrogance, about irreversible damage. The crater does not speak these fears aloud, but it reflects them with perfect indifference. For the Soviet engineers who lit the fire in 1971, the decision was procedural, a risk mitigation step. There is no record of dramatic debate, no evidence of doubt recorded in official documents, and that absence is perhaps the most unsettling detail of all. The gate of hell was not born from recklessness, but from routine. That is what makes it resonate so strongly today. Modern civilization runs on countless similar decisions, small, technical choices made under pressure, justified by short-term logic. Most are harmless, some are beneficial, and a few, like Darvaza, escape their intended boundaries and persist far beyond their creators. Standing at the crater, it becomes impossible not to wonder how many other Darvazas exist elsewhere, unseen. Processes set in motion beneath oceans, inside reactors, within ecosystems, all burning quietly, waiting for future generations to notice. There is a peculiar silence around responsibility at Darvaza. No memorial plaques, no official apology etched into stone. The fire burns without commentary, as though the earth itself has chosen not to accuse anyone directly. That silence invites reflection more effectively than blame ever could. Local guides sometimes speak softly when explaining the site, not out of superstition, but out of habit. Voices drop near the edge, as though raised volume might provoke something. This instinctive behavior reveals how deeply the presence of the crater affects human psychology. Even when we understand the science, we still respond as if something ancient and dangerous is listening. Darvaza blurs the boundary between the rational and the primal. The intellect knows it is methane combustion. The nervous system responds as though standing before an open mouth. The desert amplifies this effect. Karakum offers no distractions, no trees, no cities, no movement beyond wind and sand. The isolation strips away context, leaving only the fire and the observer. In that emptiness, thoughts echo more loudly. Some visitors report dreams after leaving, not of fire, but of holes, openings, endless depths. The crater does not chase them in nightmares. It waits, passive, patient, always burning. The longer one studies Darvaza, the clearer it becomes that the gate of hell is less about destruction and more about endurance. It does not consume everything around it. It simply refuses to stop. And that refusal is what makes it frightening. Because if something created accidentally can persist for decades without intention, oversight, or control, then permanence itself becomes suspect. Stability no longer feels safe. It feels conditional. Darvaza forces a reconsideration of progress. It challenges the assumption that human advancement always moves forward, correcting its errors along the way. Here, the error remains untouched, glowing against the darkness, immune to correction. The crater does not demand attention. It does not expand its influence aggressively. It waits for humans to come to it. And when they do, it offers no answers, only presence. And perhaps that is the deepest uneasy creates. Not that it burns, but that it burns without purpose now. The fire no longer protects anyone. It no longer solves a problem. It exists because stopping it is harder than allowing it to continue. In that sense, the gate of hell is not a monument to failure. It is a monument to inertia. In many ways, the most unsettling aspect of the gate of hell is not what it represents today, but what it suggests about tomorrow. Darvaza is already old enough to outlive the political system that created it. The Soviet Union collapsed, borders shifted, ideologies faded, and yet the fire remained, burning through transitions, reforms, and generations without acknowledging any of them. This longevity alters how responsibility is perceived. When the people who made the decision are gone, when the institutions that authorized it no longer exist, accountability dissolves into abstraction. The fire becomes orphaned. It belongs to no one, yet everyone inherits it. Future generations did not choose Darvaza, but they live with it. That inheritance carries a subtle psychological burden. It teaches a quiet lesson, that consequences do not always align with intention, and they do not always respect timelines. In a world increasingly driven by speed and efficiency, Darvaza is stubbornly slow. It burns at its own pace, unconcerned with urgency. Environmental researchers often describe the crater as a, quote, controlled anomaly, unquote. But that phrase disguises an uncomfortable truth. There is nothing truly controlled about it. There is only tolerance, acceptance. The decision, renewed each year, to let the fire continue because intervening feels riskier than doing nothing. This logic echoes far beyond the desert. The gate of hell becomes a symbol not just of human error, but of human hesitation, of moments when societies recognize a problem, yet delay action, because the solution feels uncertain, expensive, or politically inconvenient. Darvaza burns not because it must, but because stopping it requires courage equal to the mistake that created it. At night, when the stars emerge above the desert, the contrast becomes painfully clear. The sky speaks of vastness, of distances measured in light years, of forces beyond human influence. The crater below speaks of the opposite, of how deeply human action can scar even the most ancient landscapes. Between those two infinities stands the observer. Some visitors report feeling an unexpected sense of guilt, despite having no personal connection to the site's origin. It is a collective guilt, diffuse and difficult to articulate, a recognition that modern life is built upon countless invisible fires, resource extraction, environmental compromise, deferred consequences, most of which are hidden from view. Darvaza is simply the one that refuses to hide. Humans are exceptionally good at starting processes, but far less skilled at ending them. Beginning feels decisive. Ending requires restraint, and restraint rarely carries the same sense of triumph. Over the decades, Darvaza has become normalized. Tourists visit, photographs circulate, travel blogs describe it with awe. This normalization is not accidental. It is a coping mechanism. When something cannot be changed, the mind reframes it as acceptable, even fascinating. But fascination does not equal resolution. There is a quiet danger in aestheticizing consequences. When the fire becomes beautiful, when it becomes a backdrop for stories and images, its origin fades into the background. The crater risks becoming mythologized rather than confronted. Yet even stripped of symbolism, Darvaza remains a practical warning. Methane, the gas feeding the flames, is one of the most potent greenhouse gases known. Every second it burns, it releases energy into the atmosphere. While the scale of Darvaza alone will not alter the planet's climate, its message is clear. Invisible processes matter, even when their effects feel distant. The crater does not scream catastrophe. It whispers persistence. Some engineers argue that the fire will eventually extinguish itself, that the gas supply will one day diminish. Perhaps it will, but the uncertainty itself is the point. No one can say when. No one can promise closure. Darvaza exists in a state of suspended consequence, unresolved and unresolvable in the short term. This uncertainty mirrors the broader human condition in an age shaped by technology.
We live surrounded by systems whose long-term effects remain unclear. Energy grids, digital networks, ecological interventions, all designed with confidence, all carrying unknown futures. Darvaza is simply the one that burns where we can see it. There is a moment, often just before leaving, when visitors turn back for one final look. The flames flicker, the heat pulses, and the crater seems unchanged by their presence. That final glance carries a strange humility, a recognition that some things continue regardless of observation. The gate of hell does not demand belief. It does not require fear. It simply exists, glowing steadily beneath the desert sky. And in that existence lies its power. It reminds us that progress without foresight leaves marks, that solutions chosen for convenience can become legacies, that not every problem announces itself as urgent. Some simply wait, burning quietly, until urgency becomes unavoidable. Darvaza does not threaten the world. It teaches it. The lesson is not written in flame, but in duration, not in destruction.
There comes a moment, usually late at night, when the gate of hell stops feeling like a place and begins to feel like an idea. The desert grows quiet enough that even the wind seems hesitant, and the flames become the only moving thing left in the world. In that stillness, Darvaza no longer appears as an accident or a landmark. It becomes a question, one that does not expect an answer. Philosophers have long argued that hell is not defined by fire, but by permanence, endless repetition, the absence of resolution. By that definition, Darvaza qualifies more than any imagined underworld. Nothing dramatic happens here anymore. No transformation, no escalation, only continuation. The fire does not rage, it persists. Standing at the edge, a person is forced into an unfamiliar mental position. There is nothing to do, no ritual, no interaction, no way to influence the outcome. In a civilization built on intervention and control, this helplessness is deeply unsettling. We are accustomed to believing that observation leads to understanding, and understanding leads to mastery. Darvaza breaks that chain. You can understand it completely, chemically, mechanically, historically, and still be powerless before it. The illusion of closure. We tell ourselves that every problem has an endpoint, every crisis a solution, every mistake a fix. Darvaza stands as evidence that some processes, once begun, simply continue until conditions change beyond our influence. It does not punish, it does not forgive, it waits. In this way, the gate of hell becomes less about fire and more about time. Geological time, which shrugs at human lifespans. Institutional time, which outlasts governments. Consequential time, which ignores intention entirely. The crater burns at the intersection of all three, immune to urgency. The people who lit the fire are gone, their names forgotten, their justifications irrelevant, yet the outcome of their choice remains fully present, glowing in the dark. Darvaza does not remember them, but it remembers the decision. Consequences do not need memory to endure. At its deepest level, Darvaza challenges the moral framework of progress. Modern ethics often assume that harm can be mitigated retroactively, that future innovation will correct present excess. But the crater suggests another possibility, that some harm stabilizes into permanence, becoming part of the world rather than a deviation from it. When damage becomes landscape, morality loses its urgency. Visitors often report a subtle shift in self-perception here, not fear of death, but fear of insignificance, the realization that one's presence changes nothing. The fire burned before you arrived. It will burn after you leave. It will likely burn after your name is spoken for the last time. This is not nihilism, it is clarity. Darvaza strips away comforting narratives. It offers no redemption arc, no villain to defeat, no moment of triumph. It exists beyond storytelling conventions, which is why it feels so heavy. Stories are how humans process meaning. Darvaza resists being turned into one. Even the label Gate of Hell fails under close scrutiny. Hell implies intention, judgment, purpose. Darvaza has none. It is not a punishment designed for sinners. It is a byproduct designed for no one. And yet, people keep returning to it. Perhaps because, in a world saturated with noise, Darvaza offers something rare: silence with consequence. It does not distract. It does not entertain. It confronts quietly. And quiet confrontations are harder to escape. The fire reveals an uncomfortable symmetry between humanity and the planet it inhabits. Both are capable of sustaining processes far longer than anticipated. Both carry scars that do not heal quickly. The difference is that the planet does not pretend otherwise. Humans speak of legacy as something intentional: buildings, ideas, achievements. Darvaza introduces a darker category: unintended legacy. Marks left behind not through ambition, but through oversight. Legacies that persist without admiration. What if the things we leave behind are not monuments, but mechanisms? As the night deepens, the crater's glow pulses faintly against the stars. Above, the universe expands in every direction, vast and indifferent. Below, the fire mirrors that indifference on a human scale. Between them, the observer stands briefly, aware of both infinities and belonging fully to neither. In that moment, Darvaza becomes less about guilt and more about responsibility, not backward-looking blame, but forward-looking restraint. It suggests that wisdom is not measured by how boldly we act, but by how carefully we choose what not to begin. The gate of hell does not demand reverence, it demands patience. Patience to sit with discomfort, patience to accept unresolved endings, patience to acknowledge that control has limits. And perhaps that is why it feels darker the longer one looks at it. Not because it threatens destruction, but because it offers no escape from consequence. The fire burns on, steady and unremarkable, illuminating the desert just enough to reveal how empty it truly is. There is a point, usually after the fire has been watched long enough, when thought itself begins to slow. Not because the mind is overwhelmed, but because it has exhausted its usual defenses. Explanations have already been applied, comparisons have already been made. What remains is something quieter, a confrontation with endurance. Darvaza does not ask whether it should exist. That question belongs exclusively to those who stand above it. The fire below operates outside morality, outside regret. It follows only the logic of fuel and oxygen, pressure and release. And in doing so, it exposes a gap between human ethics and physical reality. We assign meaning, the universe does not. In many belief systems, hell is a place of judgment, designed to correct moral failure through suffering. Darvaza offers no such structure. There is no correction here, no progression toward resolution. The fire does not purify. It does not destroy anything meaningful anymore. It simply continues, and that continuation strips away the comfort of purpose. The most unsettling thought is not that the gate of hell exists, but that it could stop being remarkable. That one day its flames might no longer inspire reflection or dread, only familiarity. That permanence can dull even the sharpest warnings. History suggests this is not only possible, but inevitable. Human beings are extraordinarily adaptable. We normalize danger, absorb contradiction, and learn to live alongside what once terrified us. Nuclear reactors hum quietly in your cities. Polluted rivers become landmarks. Craters that burn for decades become destinations. Adaptation is often framed as resilience, but at Darvaza, it feels more like surrender. That observation leads to change. Darvaza is widely known. Its origin is documented. Its symbolism is obvious. And yet, it burns on. Knowledge alone has not been enough. This realization cuts deeply because it undermines the belief that understanding is salvation. Standing there, one begins to suspect that humanity's greatest limitation is not ignorance, but hesitation. The reluctance to confront consequences that lack clear solutions. The preference for living with known damage rather than risking unknown outcomes. Darvaza survives because it is predictable. The fire will burn tonight, it will burn tomorrow. It will burn without surprise. And in a world filled with volatility, predictability carries its own kind of comfort, even when it is destructive. That comfort is dangerous. It trains us to accept slow harm as background noise, to tolerate processes that should disturb us, simply because they do not escalate. Darvaza does not scream, it whispers steadily, and whispers are easier to ignore. There is a profound loneliness embedded in the crater's existence, not emotional loneliness, but ethical isolation. No one stands fully responsible anymore. The decision makers are gone, the systems have moved on, responsibility has dissolved into history, yet the fire remains present tense. This creates a fracture in how humans relate to time. We think in projects, in lifetimes, in cycles of effort and reward. Darvaza exists outside those frames. It does not care how long you live. It does not care when you arrive. It burns in a timescale that belongs neither to geology nor to humanity, but to consequence. This is why the gate of hell feels heavier at night. Darkness removes distraction. Without sunlight, without color, without reference points, the fire becomes the only narrative left, and that narrative has no words. Some visitors report a moment of quiet panic, not fear of falling in, but fear of understanding too clearly. Fear that the crater reflects something universal, that human civilization itself may be built on countless small fires, most of them unseen, most of them tolerated, all of them consuming something finite. Darvaza is simply the one that refuses to stay hidden. There is no ceremony when one leaves the site, no closing statement, no final image of triumph or redemption. You walk away and the fire does not follow. It does not threaten, it does not warn. It lets you go, unchanged by your presence.
and that indifference lingers, because it suggests that meaning is not guaranteed by impact, that just because something affects us deeply does not mean it acknowledges us in return. The universe does not negotiate with attention. In this way, the gate of hell becomes a meditation on humility, not the humility of fear, but the humility of limits. Limits to control, limits to foresight, limits to repair. It reminds us that restraint is often more powerful than action, that the most ethical decision may be the one that prevents a process from ever beginning, rather than trying to correct it later. The fire beneath the desert does not ask to be extinguished. It does not ask anything at all. The question is whether humanity will learn to recognize future Darvazas before they ignote, or whether recognition will always arrive too late. As the final glow fades behind the dunes, one truth remains uncomfortably clear. The gate of hell is not a warning carved into stone. It is a warning written in duration, a reminder that some consequences do not end with awareness, that some doors, once opened, do not close politely. They remain open, burning quietly, waiting not for judgment, but for time to pass. And time, unlike fire, does not burn out.
In the heart of the Karakum Desert, where the land stretches endlessly beneath a pale and merciless sky, there is a place where darkness never fully arrives. When the sun sinks beyond the flat horizon and the desert exhales the heat it has hoarded all day, night should claim the land completely. But here, something resists the dark. A glow rises, not from the heavens, but from the earth itself. It does not erupt. It does not roar into existence. It has simply been there for decades, constant, uninterrupted, breathing fire into the open air, as though the ground itself were alive. Locals call it the Gate of Hell, not because they are certain it leads to the underworld spoken of in ancient texts, but because when a person stands before a vast pit of unending fire in the middle of an empty desert, there are very few names that feel appropriate. The flames stain the night sky with deep shades of orange, bending the horizon and erasing the clear boundary between land, air, and something far below. By day, Darvaza does not immediately appear terrifying. Under the sun, it is simply a large crater, its edges collapsed and uneven, resting quietly in the sand. Without the flames, without the thin smoke drifting upward, it could be mistaken for a forgotten geological scar. But when night falls, the transformation is absolute. The crater becomes a gaping mouth, and within it, thousands of flames dance continuously, never settling into a predictable rhythm. Standing near the edge, one does not need to lean forward to feel the heat. It does not strike violently. It spreads evenly, tightening the skin, slowing the breath. The air trembles, visibly distorted, as though reality itself is bending under the temperature. The fire here does not behave like a campfire or an industrial blaze. There is no single center, no heart of the flame. It exists everywhere at once, spread across the crater floor, persistent and unfocused. What unsettles many visitors is not the fire itself, but the absence of everything else. There are no solid barriers, no guards, no warning sirens, just desert, wind, and a burning pit that has been alive for more than half a century. If you step too close, no one will stop you. If you turn away, the fire does not respond. Darvaza exists entirely independent of human presence. Unlike many places shrouded in mystery, the Gate of Hell is not born of ancient legend. It is not a cursed land whispered about for centuries, nor a relic of a lost civilization. Its origins are painfully modern. It is the product of an era deeply confident in science, engineering, and humanity's ability to command nature. In 1971, during the Soviet era, geologists were drilling for natural gas in the Karakum Desert. The region was believed to hold immense untapped resources, and Darvaza was nothing more than a convenient point on a map. It carried no special name, no cultural significance, no warning signs etched into history. Beneath the sand, however, lay a massive underground pocket of methane gas, hollow and unstable. When the drill reached it, the ground could not withstand the pressure. The collapse came suddenly, but not violently. There was no thunderous explosion, no dramatic shockwave. The earth simply gave way, swallowing the drilling rig and leaving behind a yawning crater. Faced with a pit filled with toxic and highly flammable gas, the engineers made a decision that at the time seemed logical. To prevent the gas from spreading and poisoning the surrounding area, they ignited it. The expectation was simple. The gas would burn off within days, perhaps weeks at most, and then extinguish itself. No one anticipated what lay beneath. The gas supply was not limited. It was vast, connected, and continually feeding the fire. Days passed, then months, then years. The flames did not fade. They persisted, quietly consuming what the earth continued to offer. A decision meant to solve a problem had instead opened something permanent. There was no way to reverse it, no switch to turn off. Darvaza became an unintended monument, a wound in the earth created not by myth or malice, but by human certainty. It was never meant to frighten anyone, yet it unsettles far more deeply than any story of demons or curses, because it is undeniably real. Standing before the gate of hell does not make a person feel small in the same way a mountain or an ocean does. The sensation is different. You do not feel like a central observer. You feel irrelevant. The fire does not acknowledge you. It does not grow brighter when you approach, nor weaker when you leave. It burns for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Darvaza does not remember humanity. It does not react. It does not care. And it is precisely this indifference that gives it its infernal reputation. Not a place of dramatic punishment, but a space where something terrible continues without the need for witnesses. The heat rising from the crater does more than distort the air. It quietly alters the human mind. After standing there long enough, many people begin to notice that time feels different to Darvaza. Not slower because nothing is happening, but slower because nothing ever changes. The flames never surge dramatically. They never weaken and surrender. They burn with a patience that feels almost deliberate. The wind moves across the desert and brushes the edge of the pit, tilting the flames for a moment before they settle back into their endless rhythm. There is no climax to witness, no conclusion to wait for, just repetition, steady and unbroken. And repetition, when observed long enough, becomes unsettling in its own way. Visitors often arrive expecting a clear emotional reaction: fear, awe, excitement, something sharp and immediate. But the gate of hell rarely delivers anything so simple. Instead, it plants a quiet unease, one that grows slowly as the mind searches for meaning where none is offered. The question that lingers is not how dangerous the place is, but why it continues to exist exactly as it does. Why a mistake made decades ago still burns openly beneath the night sky. Why an open wound in the earth has been allowed to become normal, photographed, shared, even admired. The fire consumes fuel drawn from deep underground, and no one standing at its edge can say with certainty when or if it will ever end. For the people who live in distant settlements scattered across the Karakum, Darvaza is not a philosophical symbol. It is part of the landscape. Children grow up hearing about the burning crater the way others hear about rivers or mountains. It is strange but familiar, dangerous but distant. To them, the desert itself is the real adversary. The isolation, the heat, the scarcity of water. Life here has always required adaptation, and the gate of hell is simply another constant, neither blessing nor immediate threat. It does not chase, it does not spread, it waits. Scientists have returned to Darvaza many times, studying the possibility of extinguishing the flames. On paper, the solution appears straightforward: cut off the gas supply and the fire will die. In reality, the system beneath the desert is far more complex. The Karakum sits atop vast, interconnected networks of natural gas, shifting in pressure and volume. Any aggressive attempt to seal or suffocate the crater risks triggering collapses or leaks elsewhere, potentially creating new disasters in the process. Over time, the problem ceased to be purely technical. Darvaza became a symbol, and symbols, once formed, are difficult to dismantle. The name Gate of Hell spread far beyond Turkmenistan. Journalists, travelers, and filmmakers transformed a failed drilling site into an icon of mystery. Nighttime photographs exaggerated the scale, making the crater appear like a portal into something infinite and malevolent. Yet the reality is more unsettling than the mythology. There is nothing supernatural here. No voices, no signs, no hidden intelligence behind the fire. Only chemistry, pressure, and human error. And perhaps that is why Darvaza lingers so heavily in the mind. It does not offer the comfort of a legend. It offers no villain to blame, except ourselves. When darkness deepens, the flames shift subtly in color. Orange melts into gold. White-hot points flicker at the crater's base, hinting at temperatures far beyond what the eye can measure. These changes follow no pattern. No observer can predict what the fire will do next, only that it will continue. Some people have sat at the edge of the pit for hours, saying nothing, recording nothing. And after the time passes, the thoughts of daily life fade. Work, obligations, trivial concerns dissolve into the background. In their place rise larger, heavier questions.
How many other processes have we set in motion without understanding their full lifespan? How many consequences are still burning somewhere, unseen, long after the original decision-makers are gone? Darvaza does not kill on a massive scale. It does not flatten cities or poison entire regions overnight. And because of that, it is easy to dismiss, easy to tolerate. But it represents something more dangerous than sudden catastrophe. It represents slow, persistent consequence. When people finally turn away and walk back into the darkness of the desert, the light vanishes quickly behind them. Within minutes, the glow is swallowed by night, as though the crater never existed at all. But the image does not disappear so easily from the mind. It follows, lingering like residual heat beneath the skin. The first chapter of The Gate of Hell is not a story about fire. It is a story about certainty, about the confidence of an era that believed every problem had a controllable solution, about a moment when humanity opened something it never truly knew how to close. And there, in the silent heart of the Karakum Desert, the flames continue to burn, not as a punishment, not as a warning spoken aloud, but as a quiet reminder that some doors, once opened, remain open far longer than anyone intended.